Today I'd like to speak about the third pair of Niyana and Avarana, the third pair of escape routes or pathways out of the suffering of samsara and its corresponding obstacle. And that pair is called aloka sanya. Aloka sanya is the way out, and the avarana or obstacle to that is tina mida. In aloka sanya, the word aloka means light, and the word sanya means perception of, or to make a note of, or simply to look at. So the compound word aloka sanya means the perception of light, or to look at a light. And this is called aniyana because it is a way out of suffering for the noble ones. Tina meta, which is translated as sloth and torpor, it is a dull, heavy, lazy state of mind. And it is called avarana because it covers over or it blocks this pathway out, this escape route of aloka sanya, or looking at a light. The meaning given of aloka sanya is a very simple meaning, to just translate aloka as a light. And in samatha there is that type of meditation on a light or on light as an object. And this is not part of the vipassana practice, but in the realm of vipassana, the word aloka sanya can mean to note so as to make the object distinct, to make the observation very clear. So aloka sanya actually has both of those meanings. It is said in Pali, aloka sanya aryanang niyanang taya aloka sanyaya aryanang niyanti. So it means that this perception of light, or noting so as to make the object distinct, is the escape route of the noble ones. Because by means of that perception of light, by means of noting so that the object is very distinct, the noble ones go out of the suffering of samsara. Therefore it is called a niyana. And it is also said, tina medang niyana varanang, that tina mida is called an obstacle or avarana to this pathway out because it obstructs this pathway. And it keeps people from knowing that this is the way to go out. It keeps people from knowing about the perception of light or knowing how to make the object distinct. What sorts of light can we look at? Well, aloka refers, of course, to natural lights, such as the sun, the moon, the stars, and also electric or gas lights or whatever. And further, as well as these natural or other forms of physical light, it refers to what is called in Pali obhasa, O-B-H-A long A-S-A. And this is a light that arises during meditation due to the purity of mind, especially at the stage of, for example, but at other times too, it can arise at the stage of observing the fast knowledge of the fast arising and passing away of phenomena, or udyabhya jnana. It's when the mind is free of defilements. This light can even, sometimes it emits from the yogi's body. It's caused by the mind, and it's something that the yogi sees, but it also is something that even yogis sometimes can light up a whole room with their radiant mind. So this type of light is also something that can be observed. And so aloka sanya means to look at these sorts of lights. Light has a natural power inherent in it, even when we don't pay special attention to it. In the dark, the mind contracts, and therefore it becomes dull, and the mental energy falls as if the mind were lazy. On the other hand, when there is a light, then the mind is fresh and open. So light has its own power. When we look at a light, when we observe a light, then mental power is added to the inherent power of light, so the mind becomes more fresh and more open. And therefore, dullness or slackness or laziness, that will go away. This is because the mind is alert and active, and therefore those mind states can't arise. In the Buddha's time, there was the Venerable Moggallana, his second chief disciple. The Venerable Moggallana was already enlightened to the first stage. He was a stream winner, a sotapanna. And he was meditating to realize the higher stages of the path. And at that time, he was nodding during his sitting. The Buddha knew this and went to him and taught him 7 ways to overcome sleepiness, which I mentioned previously. And these 7 methods include looking at a light. The Venerable Moggallana used these 7 methods, and he overcame drowsiness. He gained the higher stages of the path and realized arahantship. So this is the capability of this method of alokasanya. One can note a light or look at a light, overcome drowsiness, and then dispel this dull mind that causes drowsiness. When the mind is dull and the yogi is drowsy, then the yogi should remove the drowsiness by looking at a light. And after dispelling that dull mind, develop vipassana. So if the person develops vipassana, in the end, there will be true peace. So this is why alokasanya is called the niyana, or escape route, of the noble ones. In the realm of vipassana practice, alokasanya also means noting so as to make the mind and matter field of observation distinct, to make the noting clear and distinct. And this will eliminate the sleepy, drowsy, dull, heavy laziness. It will remove these qualities. To note so that the observation is distinct, a yogi cannot note what we say in English perfunctorily. That is, just like you're performing a job in a superficial way. You have to strengthen mental powers. And in this strengthening of mental powers, the aiming quality of vitakka and the effort, called virya in Pali, are very important. Vitakka aims the mind and is focused on the mind, like pointing at it. And this is a jhanic factor, a factor involved in absorption meditation as well. And virya, or effort, has the quality of being awake, alert, and active. So these 2 qualities are essential in overcoming tinamida, or calling sloth and torpor, the dull mind, dull, lazy mind. When there's tinamida, the mind becomes contracted and closed up, and vitakka, or aiming, makes the mind open, and it rejuvenates the mind. So initially the mind may be, under the influence of tinamida, contracted, closed up, and weary. But when focusing on some object, aiming and looking with focused attention, then the mind becomes refreshed. It's like it blossoms. The quality of aiming is the direct opposite of tina and mita. And effort or virya is also needed. It won't be to do without alertness or to be inactive or sluggish. The mind should always be active and alert and warm in a way, and buoyant. This sort of mind has to be focused on the object of observation. So we exert mental energy to get the mind to the object, which is virya, and then the aiming quality focuses the mind on the object. These two factors, when they are always present, then what happens is that the mind rubs against the object. It's as if it rubs against the object, and the noting becomes effective. So another way to say it is the effort gets the mind to the object, and aiming makes the mind connect with the object. But this rubbing quality is when the mind is sustained on the object. So this sustaining of the mind on the object, or rubbing against the object, is another factor of jhana, another factor of absorption. And when that quality, that second quality, starts to get activated, then the mind that is closed and dull becomes open and buoyant, and tina mita is dispelled. So this is why, and this is what is meant by noting so as to make the object of observation distinct. Sometimes it can happen that people set up for themselves a very luxurious type of sitting place. And I don't see too many examples of that here, but you can see it elsewhere. If we sit in a very luxurious way, then we feel comfortable. And at that time, we may not want to make very much effort because we feel comfortable. And if initially we feel afraid of feeling tired or afraid to feel pain, then it's even more so that we will not want to make effort in the practice. On top of that, if the noting is just superficial, as though you're reciting a laundry list or something like that, rising, falling, without any accurate aim, then very quickly the mind will get dull and contract, become drowsy, and start to nod. The person will start to nod or get sleepy. So in this case, the yogi needs to get help from the two mental powers of vitaka, or aiming, and virya, or effort, in order to make the object distinct. If the yogi meditates so that these two mental factors are energized and balanced, then the yogi will see that the object of observation is very, very clear. And what can happen then is that whether it's day or night, the mind remains clear, sometimes without any sleepiness at all, even at night. And the yogi may perhaps the yogi lets up on noting to go to sleep, but at that time may not fall asleep. The yogi can simply keep on noting every arising object automatically. And this is because of overcoming tina mita, by noting so that the mind and matter object of observation is very distinct. So this is aloka sanya. With that sort of noting, the yogi can develop vipassana knowledge, and from there develop the levels of path knowledge, and finally exit from the cycle of samsaric suffering. That is why noting so as to make this mind-matter object of observation distinct is called niyana, the niyana, or escape route of the noble ones. So simply to remember that this word aloka sanya, it refers to both the methods that I've described for overcoming tina mita. First of all, to look at an ordinary light and remove the dull mind or the drowsiness by doing so. Or second, as in Vipassana, to activate or increase aim and effort to make the presently arising object of observation distinct. We can use both of these. If we use either one of these two methods as appropriate, we are sure to gain the upper hand over the cause of sleepiness, which is Tinamita. Tinamita refers both to the dull, lazy mind that is the cause of sleepiness, and it also refers to being extremely lazy to regard every arising object without a gap in this present practice of meditation that we are doing here. Tinamita is an obstacle to the pathway of alokasanya. So that Tinamita does not arise, make full mental effort and note continuously. If it does arise, then note steadfastly to make the object clear and distinct until sleepiness goes away. The Buddha used another word to describe this active, alert effort that we need in the practice to develop mental power and levels of knowledge, and that is atandito, which means tireless. Atandito. Okay, atandito refers to both types of being tired or laziness. There's the laziness that comes because of the dull mind, and it happens when we're nodding. And then the second is the mind that just does not want to do anything at all. So both of those are referred to in this. To be without both of those is atandito. Laziness is a very powerful destructive force. When we have the chance to undertake this practice, a high-level method for improving the power of the mind and knowledge, it's the nearest and cruelest enemy, because it makes the person not want to practice. Or the yogi may practice, but not really be able to do so actively with alertness and with effort. Because of that, the yogi can't practice to the point of developing concentration in a special way or developing insight. So for that reason, it's a great obstacle. And to be without that is called atandito. Laziness is very cruel. It oppresses those who want to meditate in luxury. And it is also extremely destructive. When a person has a lot of that tendency, then it doesn't really make very much difference how long they practice, because nothing special will happen. They don't make enough effort. And if a person does practice, if difficulties arise, it will be even worse. To explain a little bit more so that you will understand more about the quality of Tinamita, its natural characteristic is in Pali called anusaha asahanata. And this means its characteristic is a lack of determination, lack of exertion, shrinking from the prospect of difficulty, and when a difficult situation is inevitable, the mind doesn't have the power to face it, it faces it, but it doesn't have any power to resist it. So the person is not able to just grit their teeth and produce some effort in order to overcome the difficulty. The mind retracts. That's when the mind is scared, then it shrinks. So this shrunken sort of mind is what is meant by anusaha. It's the mental quality that causes the mind to shrink. When the mind is shrunken, it becomes dull and slack, contracted. It is not fresh, and we could use the word lazy for this type of mind. And at that time, the mind is sluggish. So when the mind is sluggish, Tinamida weakens the mind and overwhelms it. And the mind that is overwhelmed by Tinamida and without energy is not able to keep the sitting posture of the body upright anymore. So then the yogi falls asleep or nods repeatedly. And that is how Tinamida weakens the mind so that it can't maintain the sitting posture any longer. And it's very obvious that that quality of Tina has entered the mind when the body is nodding. Tinamida overwhelms and enervates the mind. It makes it without energy. It makes the mind shrink and withdraw. It takes away its stamina. And it causes the mind to close up rather than being open and resting on the object. And it makes the mind solidified, like butter gets solidified when it's cold. So the mind too becomes kind of frozen, the way butter can get when it gets cold. First it thickens and then it gets hard. And this hardness is something that is obvious in the mind in the following way. You know, if you go to somebody who's nodding, if the teacher goes up to them and tries to say something to them so that they won't, be sleepy, the person gets angry. Who are you to speak to me? That sort of attitude can come up. That's just the way the mind gets when it's sleepy. The butter becomes hard when it's exposed to cold, and the mind also becomes kind of hard and coarse. When you need to make something with butter, to liquefy it, when the butter is hard, you have to apply heat. And when you heat up the butter, then the butter will gradually get soft, and finally it will become a liquid. So in order to soften up and dissolve this thick, hard, frozen solid mental quality of Tina, then we need the heat of courageous effort or virya. And this type of effort, this courageous effort or ardent effort, is called atapa virya. We know the word atapi from the Satipatthana Sutta, and it's translated as ardent. That type of effort is what we need. Ardent effort, and you can either say stringent or inexorable. The mind has to be alert and decisive to note every arising object without a gap, and that is what is called ardent effort. So when we apply the heat of that type of effort, then the mind gets warmed up, and Tina cannot enter the stream of consciousness and cannot make the mind solidified or frozen.
Donc l'esprit doit être alerte, doit être déterminé à connaître chaque objet qui apparaît sans interruption. Il faut chauffer l'esprit, et quand l'esprit est chauffé, Tinamida n'est plus en mesure de solidifier ou de gélifier l'esprit.
And that is about Tina. But Mida has the characteristic of what is said, asati vigata. A-S-S-A-T-I V-A-G-A-T-A. And asati means to be devoid of sati, or mindfulness. And vigata means weariness. So it means the state of having absolutely no energy left because there is no mindfulness. When a person feels sleepy, when they want to go to sleep, then the awareness that is needed to do any sort of task whatsoever is just not there. And this depletion of sati is called asati. So that refers to a state of mind. It's a mental quality, the way the concomitant mind states, weariness of the concomitant mind states. That is what is known as mida. So Mida is weariness that is due to lacking the power of sati. So just to repeat, tina is the quality of the contracted mind that doesn't want to exert energy. And mida is the quality of being weary due to an absence of sati or mindfulness. I want to interject at this point. I mentioned that there are 7 ways to overcome sleepiness, and some of you know them and some of you don't. So I'd like to just briefly repeat that list. Does anyone remember the first one? Well, the first one is to change the perception. If you got sleepy watching rising and falling, you turn to sitting and touching. So you change your object until the mind becomes refreshed. And when the mind gets refreshed, you go back to what you were observing before it fell asleep. The second method is to bring to mind something that you have memorized. And it can be words of Dhamma. But if you haven't got any of those memorized, then you can bring to mind something else. When your mind feels refreshed, then you go back to your original object of meditation. The third method is to recite that thing that you memorized aloud, but very softly, since we are with others, so just in a soft way. And that act of paying attention, that energizes the mind. So these are ways of getting the aiming factor, the vitakka, energized to use these different methods. And the fourth method is you can twist your ear, hard, or you can rub yourself like this, And then the fifth method is what we have just discussed, aloka sanya, to either look at a light, look up and look at one of the lights, or or to make the noting very distinct, which of course is very good to do in Vipassana. Then next you can, if that prior method doesn't work, then you go on to the next one. And the next one is to get up and wash your face, put some water on your face. And if that works, as soon as something works, you have to go back and return to your sitting and to the meditation you were doing. And then after that, if that washing the face doesn't work, then you do walking meditation. And if that's all the 7 methods. So if that doesn't work, the Buddha said, then you go to sleep. But what really helps is to know these are the 7 ways of getting rid of sleepiness, and to be willing to use each one. You just go through the list one by one, and usually you can get rid of the sleepiness by the 7th method. And then every time you try to work with sleepiness, your ability to work with it improves, so that you need to use fewer and fewer of the methods until you can have enough mindfulness to dispel it through simply doing the practice as mentioned, making the object of observation or the field of observation very distinct. So we need the aiming power that gets activated through the practice or through these methods, and we also need courageous effort. And when a person understands very well what the benefits are of this practice, and because of understanding the benefits has full faith in doing the method and the desire to obtain the benefits, that sort of person tends to have very good courageous effort even from the start of the practice. The yogi applies continual effort to observe every arising object, applying heat to the mind. And then tinamita, it doesn't arise for a person who meditates courageously in that way. Or if it does, the tinamita is not so bad. The yogi can observe it and it will disappear in a moment. And when the yogi notes the object distinctly, as indicated by this method of aloka sanya, the object becomes distinct and bright, and the mind becomes swift, and the practice becomes good. So that sort of person will gain special concentration and knowledge in a short time. And I hope that all of you will be able to do so. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.